Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us as you enter the virtual room to today's CASBO's webinar on preparing school facilities for reopening safely. The PowerPoint presentation is loaded in a PDF in the Q&A box. We will also be using the Q&A box to list out your questions. So as you hear the presenters discuss issues, don't be shy. Submit your questions now. Elizabeth will review them in the last 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll have time for Q&A. There's also a hand feature, so if you feel comfortable, we would love to hear your voice. It's, I think, much better to hear your live question, so you're also welcome to speak by using the hand feature. So today's presentation, we're very excited to have, I'll begin by introducing myself, Sarah Bacchus, the Chief Governmental Relations Officer for CASBO, the California Association of School Business Officials. And joining me from CASBO is Elizabeth Esquivel, Senior Director of Policy and Governance. We both are the advocates for our organization that represents 24,000 school business leaders in the state of California. We focus on everything from school finance all the way to technology and facilities. So today's presentation, we're very excited to have our facilities experts. With us is Alan Rising, the Business Service Administrator for Long Beach Unified School Districts. With him is Sarah Slater, the Assistant Director of Fiscal Services for Long Beach Unified School District, and Jeff Becker, the Senior Director of Facilities and Operations for the Office of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. I'll turn it over to Jeff, and as they begin, I've asked them to please share with us how they began their career in education. We have a few fellows on the call, and we have some senior staff, but I think it's always interesting to hear how have we all landed here. Both Elizabeth and I were fellows, and that's how we began our career in the Capitol, and we're very excited to continue in this profession representing schools. I'll turn it over to Jeff now.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. It is always interesting how we end up in our current roles. I will share, I started my career in government out of college as an accountant for the retirement system at the County of Fresno. And I was there for about 5 years and did a lot of interesting things, including managing the county investment pool with our county treasurer. After about 5 years there, I went to the County Office of Education. I've been here for 20 years now. 5 years in the finance department, and then 15 years as the head of our facilities and operations department. It really is a blend of in the field and technical things at the desk that just really get me excited, something new every single day. I also serve as the vice chair of the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, and we love the partnership and opportunity to support CASBO in this role. And yeah, I love my job every day. Never know what you're going to get when you get to work. So, Alan, you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I kind of took a slightly different way into schools. I've now been directly working with and for schools this is my 34th year. So I've been around for a little while. I started many, many years back for Los Angeles Unified School District in their maintenance division. At a fairly entry-level position, working on schools, directly hands-on, working for building things and repairing things at school sites. And I had the opportunity to move up through that organization. I was with LA Unified for 25 years. Eventually moved up, had several stints, many different job opportunities, several stints in the central offices to help some of the leaders in LA Unified kind of manage some of the challenges that were happening in the district at the time, as the district was going through several different budget reductions and several different initiatives, such as some of the charter school initiatives and other things that they had went through and piloted. I had the opportunity to leave LA, and I took over Glendale Unified School District, where I was there for about 6 years. Managing their bond program, managing their maintenance, their operations division, transportation, all of those type of services. Then I had the opportunity in 2016 to come to Long Beach. In Long Beach, I came over as the Executive Director of Facilities, where I helped kick off the Measure E bond program, $1.5 billion bond program that is centered on modernization and rehabilitation of our school sites. And since then, I've been able to move over to the business services administrator position, where I currently manage not only the facilities department, but also maintenance operations, transportation, warehousing, those type of activities for the district. So it's been a great career. It's had a lot of opportunities that come my way, and I've been very fortunate to be able to be where I'm at. Okay.
Raised in, can you hear me?
Oops.
Okay. Born and raised in Long Beach, went to Long Beach schools, graduated from Long Beach State, and Long Beach Unified's second most employer in Long Beach. So when I graduated, I got an entry-level job in payroll, actually, and worked my way through payroll, accounting to budget. Budget, I was there for many years, which dealt with the 2008 budget cuts, where I learned a lot about my district, and we were very, worked together to get through that. And then I had an opportunity to come to facilities about 5 years ago, which I was very scared and did not know what I was getting myself into. But I will say it's been very challenging but exciting, and there is never a dull moment every day in facilities. Been with the district for about 22 years.
Set the table a little bit with the agenda, as we're asked to share what the facility director's perspective is in regards to the pandemic and how we're responding. So our presentation, we broke it down into 4 sections. One is designing classrooms to be safe, keeping them safe, which is more the maintenance perspective. And then on the planning side, building plans in a time of uncertainty, and then coordination with various groups. And Alan and I are both fortunate to serve on the cabinet of our organization. So sometimes we get confused as to which hat we're wearing as we work our way through this together. So obviously the lines do get blurred quite a bit as we're doing all this work, so we can have a conversation about that as well. And we'll have some Q&A at the end also. So Sarah, if you could move to the next slide. I'll just introduce some demographics about Fresno COE, and then let Alan speak about Long Beach. So the County Office of Education, we are very different than a school district. We directly serve 818 students. That was our ADA last year. About 78% of those are in our unduplicated pupil count. And these are, for the most part, students with special needs that we serve through our SELPA, our Special Education Local Plan area, as well as students in our court and community schools program. So we kind of have the 2 tails of the bell curve. And then we, as a county office, provide quite a bit of assistance to our smaller school districts in Fresno County. We have 32 districts, and just support them with whatever they need and would be helpful for them to make sure they're successful with their students. Alan?
Yeah, so Long Beach is obviously a slightly different than the Fresno County Office of Ed. We're one of the larger districts in the state. We currently are battling neck and neck with Fresno for the position of 3rd. So we're either 3rd or 4th, depending on how many students enroll that day. We have about 71,500 students that we serve in a very diverse community of Long Beach. A lot of folks think about Long Beach and they think, about the Queen Mary, and they think about the oceanfront and those type of great areas that we have. But we also serve a wide range of economically diverse communities, including very needy students, students that live and exist below the poverty line, with all of the special needs that come with those students. We currently serve about 65% unduplicated count students in our district, and very, very great community to work with.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. And so we'll start talking about the design of a classroom. Go ahead and take us to the next one as well. So we want to walk you folks through what we think one of our colleagues, Tom Pace from San Bernardino City Schools, did very well. I think this is a great example of how a district can prepare a classroom space. They put significant effort into this. And they started what they called physically distancing school preparations, the PDS team. So you see that PDS acronym. And they started really May to June planning, developing guidelines, and then July, communicating those guidelines within their school community to make sure that they had buy-in from all of their sites and had all the information from the sites as to how they felt about it. And then August to present is implementation. And throughout the presentation, we'll talk about how this is really a cycle. It's, it's kind of laid out on this slide as a linear process, but this is not a linear process at all. So Alan, you want to take the next slide and comment on this one as well?
Yeah, real quick, Jeff, I wanted to comment. I wanted to give a little bit more accolades to not only San Bernardino City Unified School District, where we took a lot of this first part of this information from, because they did a great job, but also the folks that work with them at PDKWC, who really did a lot of the lion's share of the effort to really begin to provide this. So I want to give them the kudos. And then the comment I had was what Jeff had mentioned is it's an iterative process. And we'll talk about that again later on. But this process is always evolving. As the information that we get from our partners in the industry, our healthcare partners change, we go back to the drawing board and we have to adjust the plans that we've made. So this is an ongoing. We've been through this process multiple times when we were either going to come back to school at the end of last school year, we were going to come back to school at the beginning of the school year, we were going to come back to the school in the fall, we were going to come back to school in the spring. Whatever your time frame is, you're going through this iterative process again and again to be able to re-examine what your current situation is. So with that, move to the next. Jeff, you have something to say about this one?
Yeah, so in San Bernardino, they really talked about 4 areas. One is the physical modifications to the classroom, and we'll show some samples quickly here as we go through the slides. What I'll say about that area in particular, and what's challenging for facility folks, is that typically, if we're making a modification, we're building something, moving something, setting something up, but there's a degree of permanency to that. And so to have to cycle back through multiple times, the M&O folks who are setting up these classrooms are really, you've got to tip your hat to them for doing a significant amount of work and staying at it. Really, these solutions are furniture based because doing permanent modifications, which we're starting to get into now with the air quality issues, are time consuming and are the more costly changes. And they're the ones that you want to make sure that the guidance has settled enough that we know that's the route to take, because you are going to make a significant investment. So air quality, the second issue that they address, including air filtration units, making sure that systems are functioning as appropriate. They, in their district, put a HEPA air filter unit by every teacher's desk in the entire district. So that's a significant effort and a significant cost as well. Signage, some of those things to keep us moving in the right direction, health screening, signage, et cetera. Those are also important things. And then hygiene, what can we control? What can we take into our own hands as individual people and citizens in the school community? So those were the 4 areas. There's, Alan, do you want to share anything else about this slide?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I think it really shouldn't be taken lightly, the monumental effort that these 4 building blocks take from a district standpoint to be able to survey our school sites to develop this information. So to put it mildly, we're going to show you a slide here in a moment. Every single classroom plan, every single space that was occupied across the school district, the size of Long Beach or the size of San Bernardino, had to be surveyed to really look at the availability of space where you could put an individual and still retain the social distancing. We had to think about things like redefining the image of a school on how students come and go to a school, right? Many times, the way students arrive are generated by the student type, whether it's a grade level entry or exit, whether it's a time frame of when they start. We really have to revision the entire layout and operations of that school, and that is a Herculean effort for school districts to be able to do that. Things like, where do you put hand sanitizers? How do you put them out? Where do you have hand washing stations so that you don't incentivize congregations of individuals so that they don't group together around bathroom access, right? How do you spread those out to be able to allow students to access the bathroom when they need to, but not gather and group in those areas to violate the social distancing requirements? these four building blocks have been really the center of what we've been doing for many months in districts.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. So here you see what they came up with for a conceptual elementary school layout. It's built around basically students being at desks and separated with plexiglass and as large a walking area as possible for students to move around the classroom. Not a lot of extra furniture in the space, not what we're used to seeing in an elementary classroom of having stations where kids can work together on activities. So I'll just say, as a facilities person who's also interested in education, this kind of looks like the old model of learning, where students sat in rows at desks, and it's kind of the opposite of the direction that we've been moving with project-based learning. But this is the method that, based on the guidance, keeps us safe and allows us to return to school during the pandemic. So, Alan, you want to share anything about the elementary classroom?
Yeah, no, you hit right on it, Jeff, is that it's really been a step back from our collaboration-based instruction. You won't see things like small reading environments where groups of students would come together and have independent study. You won't see areas where you can have project-based learning. It's really going to become that rank and file, rows and columns kind of a layout in schools. The other thing that you'll see being removed from school sites is what I affectionately call those non-critical classroom materials, right? Most classrooms have got a lot of things in them that have been built up over the years, instructional materials, additional support information. All those things have to be removed in order to just allow for the space for physical distancing.
All right, go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Sarah. So middle school, much the same, more of an individual desk environment. And as you can see, there's 16 desks in here. So normally a middle school classroom's 30 plus or minus students. So putting a strain on the facilities and the ability to spread out our students. One thing I want to mention about all of these environments that we're going to look at is the new idea of outdoor as a learning environment, and the work that is going on now to figure out how to make that effective for a teacher to be able to function in that environment with students. So that is an emerging area that is being looked at and will also require another investment to make those spaces fully functional. Alan?
Yeah, really, the thing I wanted to point out is, as you look at these layouts, there's a lot that went into this. Things like passing zones, right? The ability for students to be able to move about the space to be able to do the work that they need to do, and not violating the social distancing areas. So that's critical. As you can see, these are a little bit larger rooms because they're middle schools, but the layout becomes very utilitarian as you begin to look at how do we still provide for the space that's needed and try to make it as functional as possible. So the number of 16, I think, generally speaking, is what we came up with almost across the industry. About a 50% capacity with social distancing, give or take, as far as how many students would be in each classroom.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. Just quickly, here's a high school layout, slightly larger classroom, a few more students in this one just because of the physical space that you could have, but the same concepts are in effect here of, as Alan said, very utilitarian, focused on the individual. So, Alan, anything you want to share about the high school layout there?
Yeah, high schools and somewhat middle schools as well created some other kind of unique challenges in that these kids move about the school throughout the day. They're not typically in one classroom all day. They're going to different type of environments, and considering things like the flow to and from different areas, considering things like how do you do nutrition services programs at a high school like this. Obviously, if you remember back on your high school days when there was like 3,000 kids all crammed into the lunch area, those things can't happen anymore. So we have to really rethink the way that we deliver nutrition products. We have to think the way that we move students around, things like bathroom usage, access to office space, counselors, all of those things that high school students need have to really be reimagined as you prepare for what it will look like with in-person instruction.
Yeah, and just I'll share from the special education perspective that the problem is even more pronounced in that you have students who are differently abled, and there is quite a bit of equipment that might be in a classroom, adaptive equipment to help them throughout the day, as well as more adults supporting them. So, a row of students with special needs is sometimes a very difficult thing to achieve in a very different environment than the three that we just looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. Those special needs students have specific needs, exceptional needs that we call them, because they have a lot of access or need for what we call manipulatives, right? Things that they touch, that they work with, and how do you do that so that you can keep those things clean, disinfected, so that there isn't that transmission? Has proven to be another opportunity that we're looking at. How do we solve that challenge?
Yeah, thanks. I'll go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Sarah. So this slide really shows those classroom layouts in action and how they arrived at them. So they hired PBK architects, as Alan mentioned, and they visited every single classroom in San Bernardino City Unified. I believe that Tom shared they have over 2,000 classrooms in their district that they visited. You can see the amount of furniture and things in there that those floor plans don't show. But going through and looking at every space was important for them to make sure that they could keep them safe. Alan?
Every space, but also I'll extend, because we put the picture of an office in there, right? Every office space. So our staff are very important to us, and we want to make sure that the staff have the ability to be able to function under the same kind of guidelines that we do in our classrooms. So things like common areas, lunchrooms, meeting rooms, work rooms, all of those spaces had to be surveyed across the entirety of the school district in order to develop plans and models for how we would outfit those spaces to allow folks to continue to do their critical work while they remain socially distant.
Next slide, please, Sarah. So the end result of their process was a classroom layout for every single class in their district. And this is secured to the door of the classroom. So a nighttime custodial crew member or support staff could know how to reset the classroom, what this classroom needs to look like to remain safe throughout the school year. So tremendous amount of work went into this by both the architecture firm as well as the school district.
Yeah, and this had to be done across every space in the district. So we could move forward.
Yeah, go ahead. Next slide, please, Sarah. So the other box, wayfinding signage, the other building block, I think we've all gotten pretty accustomed to all the signage that we see out in the communities, whether it's the grocery store with markers by the cash registers or directional arrows. They developed a package of signs to give a consistent look across their district to try and get some cultural change of the behaviors that work well during the pandemic. I do see that wellness check-in sign, and that's always been kind of a crazy one because the questions that we ask have changed many times over the past 9 months. But really a good, bright signage package. Alan?
Yeah, I think this is an area where I think San Bernardino excelled at, because really you want to have signage that's not only functional, inviting, and friendly, but it's appropriate for the individual site too, right? These are going to be children that you're going to be, helping to manage this new environment that they're unaccustomed to. So they did a great job. They really went through the process of defining all of these different signage to be able to really create that more inviting, conducive to learning environment that we're all looking for.
Yeah, next slide, please, Sarah. So this is the final implementation of what it looks like. On the top left, you see some of those signs on the classroom doors, and to the health screening area, you see the floor plan in the classroom there so that everybody knows what this room needs to look like. And then in the other pictures, you can see the plexiglass, the desk. What I'll say about the desk is you see a blue sticker and you can kind of see a yellow sticker. So that's their AB system, where during the A portion of the day, a student would sit on the blue square, and a B, the other student would sit on the yellow square to avoid the obviously those chairs aren't 6 feet apart there, but that is one method that schools have used. And you see there's still a lot of stuff going on in that classroom.
Yeah.
You want to share anything else about these photos?
Yeah, I'll just point out the bottom left screen, which really shows they implemented these health check centers, or these health screening centers, which includes some thermal cameras, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, and an area where they can have a very controlled environment to ensure that everyone that comes and goes to that consistent health check screening process. So did a really good job of how they laid those out and ensuring that they're checking everyone.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. So we'll move into talking a bit about how you maintain that environment and keep it safe. Go ahead and move us to the next slide. Alan, why don't you take us through your health screening process?
Yeah, so jumping right into that. So really, it's important to make sure that we identify symptomatic people before they enter into any of our campuses or buildings. We've developed specific health symptoms questioning, and it's evolved a little bit over time. In fact, now we're about ready to release a new evolution of that. But on the right-hand side, you'll see kind of our health screening checklist, and we made posters and individual handouts that we distributed around, and we use those every day, and we ask those questions every day of everyone that comes onto our school site. We're using a lot of technology. Everybody's talked about some of those no-touch thermometers, those handheld ones. There's been a lot of concern from some of our staff members because you do have to get in fairly close proximity of an individual or lots of individuals if you happen to be screening that day. So we looked at some of the no-touch temperature screening, like what's on the left. These are digital cameras. San Diego has implemented these. You only get within 3 to 5 feet of them, and it's able to read your temperature. It's actually able to tell you if you don't have a mask on, and it reminds you that you need to put your mask on. Really, for us, it's also been redefining and reimagining the location on the campus of where our entries are at. Inclement weather, although we are in beautiful sunny Long Beach, we do occasionally have inclement weather, and so you have to be very careful on where you are going to expect these people to stage. You don't want to create a social distancing problem on the street outside the school while people are staging trying to come in, so they have to think clearly about that. Working very closely with our staff, our own, really our most valuable resources, our internal staff and folks who are going to implement this. So working very closely on what we expect from them, what their responsibility is, and giving them the proper training and support so that they understand what to do in certain situations and how these health screenings are vital to keeping the school site safe and open.
Yeah, I'll add just a couple of thoughts to that. At a county office where we generally have smaller number of students in our classrooms, some of the things we've wrestled with are privacy issues with health screenings. And you've seen some devices that put up on a big display and 20 people walk by and it puts up the temperature and signals out the person whose temperature may be out of the acceptable range, and whether or not those systems create health records that would be subject to HIPAA. So a lot of conversations with our legal folks and our health services folks on just how you do a health screening. And even from a practical standpoint, where you do the health screening. Do you do it as students board a bus? Do you do it when they arrive at the front gate of the school? Do you do it when they arrive in the classroom? And all of those have different implications. In the photo that we saw on the previous slide, it was in a classroom, and that was the choice the district felt was best. Does a symptomatic person being in the classroom necessitate any maintenance response of disinfection once you identify that person? Lots of questions to wrestle with the health screening process from a lot of different levels. Next slide, please, sir. So on the cleaning and disinfecting side, certainly this is in the wheelhouse of maintenance and operations folks and facility directors. The heightened service expectation, when this all happened back in March and we were learning how to work in this environment, people wanted their spaces cleaned all the time, multiple times per day. They wanted to have products at their fingertips, ready to use. we were implementing new tools and equipment and putting those into the hands of our custodial staff. How is that working? How are we evaluating and controlling that process and training those folks? I'll just share at our office, what we do is 3 times per day disinfection of common areas and a 1 time per day disinfection of those classroom areas and individual offices, which works well for our people and seems to be meeting their expectation. You know, we started out in March with anytime someone uses a restroom, that restroom must be disinfected. Well, the staffing demands for that are so great that we just would be overwhelmed with resources. Alan, you want to share about your experience in Long Beach?
No, it's very much modeled that. You know, with the concern that came with the pandemic and the community reactions to that and the stay-at-home orders and all of those type of things, there was a very high level of expectations across our district with what our custodial departments needed to respond to. You know, I've heard everything from, as Jeff said, that after every use that the bathroom would need to be completely disinfected. Right? I've heard everything from no one can come into this space other than one individual, right? So it has to be kind of locked out so that nobody comes in. So there's definitely a high level of expectation, and custodial departments, I think, across our state are struggling to stay up with those demands and those needs and make sure that with the available resources we have, that we're able to meet the expectation of the users of our schools.
Yeah, go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Sarah. And I'll say part of balancing that is it's that expectation versus the guidance that's out there from the health professionals. So we spend a lot of time looking at CDC guidance on disinfecting, you know, all the way down through the State Department of Public Health and our local departments of health. This is really kind of delving into a bit more detail of what we're doing. I think that the last bullet is the one that I want to highlight. Changes to routine schedules. We went through with our custodial team and said, hey, you need to be doing these things now and training them on that. And that has an opportunity cost. That means that there are other things that are not being done any longer. So how do we prioritize those? How do we constantly evaluate that and adjust that? I will say at some of our sites where the custodial had a minor groundskeeping role, the groundskeeping is suffering right now to the benefit of disinfecting. Alan, how about you?
No, you're spot on. It's one of the first things that we did when the expectation was established that we were going to go through a very intense level of daily disinfection in all of our classrooms. We had to have that very real conversation about what's not going to happen. And that's a hard conversation to have with school sites about things that are not going to happen. And there's a role custodians play with grounds maintenance. And we just had to pull back on some of those services that we're doing in order to continue. Our district, we have not returned to face-to-face. That's the different thing where Jeff is at. So what that's allowed us to do is some of those services that we would normally provide that are directly attributable to students being in school, we've been able to refocus those efforts to disinfecting rooms that teachers are using to provide distance learning. But obviously that system will change dramatically when we do come back to in-person instruction. So evaluating those schedules, really looking very, very, you have to really prioritize those services that the custodians are providing in order to ensure that we're providing the safest environment.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. All right, so products was a big discussion when this first happened. We have some new vocabulary. We have the EPA List N, that is a list of products that are believed to be effective against the coronavirus. But as we were quickly evaluating products throughout this, we were looking at effectiveness and particularly dwell time. I think that training everyone who is not normally using products to understand that if you take a Clorox wipe and wipe a desk, it's not disinfected yet. You have to keep it damp for, 4 to 10 minutes, depending on the product. So there was quite a bit of training on that, a lot of discussion about long-term health impacts, particularly to our students, the sensitive receptors, as we introduce these products into classrooms and how you even keep them secure in classrooms. Teacher use. Alan and I kind of have a saying that, you know, if you don't give the teacher the product, the teacher's going to bring the product themselves. So in order to stay in compliance with all of the record keeping responsibilities and keeping safety data sheets up to date, and not creating a big record retention policy, you want to make sure that you're getting those products to the teacher with the training in compliance with all of those record keeping requirements. And that is a constant communication effort to do that. And then, of course, the California Healthy Schools Act. Any disinfectant is considered something that requires a 2-hour training. So making sure that folks who may not have used disinfecting products in the past receive that training, take it annually, has also been a big effort and a big focus of what we've been doing. Alan?
Yeah, I exactly mirror that, Jeff. One of our biggest concerns has been ensuring that the products that get brought into our schools are not only effective, but also don't have those long-term potential health impacts. As Jeff said, if you don't provide it to a teacher, they will bring it in. And we want to make sure that those products are safe. We want to make sure that they comply with the California Health Schools Act. And a lot of people don't recognize the fact that a disinfectant is categorized by the state as a pesticide. And as a pesticide, it's required that you go through the training in order to ensure that you properly understand the application of that pesticide. Many people think that those Clorox wipes or those Lysol wipes or all those things that you use at home are perfectly safe and effective to bring them into the classroom, and in many cases they are not. We deal with a lot of sensitive receptors. We deal with a lot of special needs students, and we need to make sure that those products that we use are not only effective, but they're being used correctly in our classrooms.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. And Alan, why don't you take this one? You've done a lot of good work in your district around this area.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So one of the things that we've really looked at very closely is how do we help support our custodial teams with new tools and equipment, new things that we need to do in order to do our job more effectively and efficiently. And one of the big areas that we've looked at is these electrostatic guns or electrostatic sprayers. These are devices that allow us to disinfect larger areas of the classroom space fairly effectively. They're self-contained, they're battery operated. They're able to accept various different disinfecting materials, and it basically it doesn't really atomize it, but it sprays it. It covers areas very effectively and allows us to minimize that amount of time that our custodial teams are able to or take in order to address a specific area. We've incorporated these in Long Beach into our routine disinfection protocol. As we said in the previous slide, we are disinfecting a lot of our high-touch areas, our sink areas, our horizontal surfaces on a daily basis. So we're doing that by providing one of these electrostatic sprayers to each of our night custodians, so that as they go through in the evening, we're a fairly high level of disinfection in all of our spaces, all of our common areas, all of our entry areas, all of those things are being done through with those electrostatic sprayers. So in addition to that, we also have a large space, we call them they're foggers. They're actually a backpack type of unit that are able to engage large facility spaces such as gymnasiums, auditoriums, big meeting room spaces, those type of areas. We're able to effectively disinfect whole schools. We can do that in a fairly short time of maybe 4 or 5 hours in an evening with a crew utilizing these foggers. This has been a key element to our response in the event that someone does come down positive for COVID or we do have an exposure to school site. We're able to effectively, utilizing what we call our specialized response team and these large foggers, be able to quickly disinfect the space. And that's really proven to be very effective with us for our staff. There's a comfort level in knowing that if someone who we work with on a particular staff does come down positive, that the district steps in pretty quickly and we're able to disinfect an entire school site to ensure that those staff members are going to be comfortable coming back and working doing the things that they need to do to support children. So that's been a really, really big success for us. And then lastly, the new tools and equipment are all the PPE, all of the personal protective equipment that we are now distributing pretty much just everywhere. There's a lot of training that needs to happen. Many folks are using these PPE devices without ever having used them before. We've created videos in order to tell teaching staff and school site staff how to don these things, how to put them on, and how to take them off, because potentially when you take them off, they could be contaminated. So you're wearing gloves, you're wearing a gown. How do you properly take these things off and dispose of them so that you don't create an exposure as you're removing them? When to use them. Many people think of the moon suits with a big respirator mask and all the things on, and we want to make sure that people understand that certain PPE have limitations, and we want to use the proper PPE for the task at hand to make sure that you have the proper kind of coverage. And all of that stems from training that we give to our school site staff, custodians, and others.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I'll just add one comment on this new equipment. We've introduced many of these same things here in Fresno County, and there's a real effort to collaborate with teaching staff, because sometimes you could think, oh, this is a silver bullet to quickly disinfect a space and make it safe again. But it requires this collaborative effort to keep the space in a condition where you can effectively use these products. I'm guilty myself with papers all over my office. It's very difficult to use these in certain environments. And the items underneath the papers maybe don't get disinfected as effectively. So really is a team effort that we're working on with this new equipment. Alan, I see we've got about 10 minutes probably to make it through the rest of this to allow some question and answer time as well. Go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll jump into this really quick. This is, just talking about our rapid response team. This is something that's proven to be very, very effective for us. We're a larger district, so we have the capability to be able to do this. We've created a team that has all the tools and equipment to be able to move to a site and rapidly disinfect an entire site or a building or a space. It's really proven quite effective in helping to hold down anxiety and concern that staff has when there's a positive case. And so that's been a really big win for us. We really spent a lot of time with our centralized custodial office, providing equipment, staff, materials, all of these things on standby. We've experienced people that have come up positive from our custodial team. So what do you do when your entire custodial team is quarantined? So we have staff on standby that are able to step in and continue to provide the services to school sites to ensure that we have safe environments. A big one I wanted to take just a second and talk about is a major impact to our custodial budgets. Right? School sites that for years we went through various different rounds of budget reductions and cutbacks and other reductions. We've really looked very closely at what is this going to do to our custodial budgets. The amount of products and equipment and tools that they're going to need to be able to do their job is dramatically increasing. So we're looking at that very, very closely for the central level to be able to see how we can maybe move some funds around on an ongoing, and I know we all hate that term, ongoing basis, but these are going to be ongoing concerns. They're not going to end anytime soon. The expectations for this level of cleaning is going to continue even beyond any vaccine or other type of things that are going to be coming in the future. We understand that.
So I'll just add to that in my office, we have had to outsource some of this work. As a small district, essentially, we didn't have the staff to have people on standby, but we have put into place a lot of contingencies to know what to do rapidly if we have an exposure at a school site that could impact our staffing levels or the ability for that school to continue operating in that classroom. So every district is looking at how they handle this based on the resources that they have available. Go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Sarah.
So I think from a large district perspective, talking about PPE, there's been some successes here. Number one is want to thank our support that we've received from the state and our local county folks that have been able to provide a pretty large quantity of PPE to help us through this process. Well, we went for quite a period of time where just sourcing appropriate quantities of personal protective equipment was daunting. I mean, it just was unavailable in the industry. And so we went through an entire phase of just spending quite a bit of resources to try to find the type of material we need and get it out to those folks that need it effectively. Really working on how do we create a distribution chain, get that PPE out to the folks that need it effectively and efficiently so that they have it when they need it. Creating all of that distribution chain from our warehouse to our ordering facilities, our procurement folks, all the way out to the individual that needs it, to ensure that there's not a break in that logistical chain has been also a pretty significant task a lot of the folks have been involved with. Training our folks about the use and applicability of the different kind of PPE out there. We've all heard about these N95 masks, which is not necessarily called for in all situations. Versus reusable masks versus disposable masks. Really talking to our folks about what type of mask is appropriate for their particular exposure, and ensuring that they have those masks readily available so that they can use them. And again, I said before, staff training and support. Following up with them, understanding what we're trying to do here and what the requirements are, and how to use all of the different things that we're providing for them.
All right, thanks, Al. Next slide, please, Sarah. So just from Fresno County's perspective, I wanted to highlight, as a county office person, the efforts of Cal OES to provide a 60-day supply of PPE to school districts. That was very much appreciated early in this process when it was difficult to source some of these supplies. A very daunting task for a very small facilities department to process and distribute. In our case, it was about 5 semi-trucks full of PPE that we broke down and distributed to school districts, but a very good thing to have happen. A lot of the same experience that Alan mentioned, we also had here in Fresno County. So supply chain issues, getting PPE into the classroom to where it's needed is one of the interesting issues. Because we have about 150 extended learning sites throughout the county that are not FCSS sites per se. And so we were trying to figure out how do we get some consistency, and how do we meter, making sure we're sending appropriate items. Certainly because we're in a pandemic, I think we're leaning towards providing things rather than questioning the need for them. But definitely wanting to push things out into the spaces so that our staff and students feel supported. Let's go ahead and take us to the next slide. We'll try and quickly go through uncertainty. So the next section, take us to the next slide. So these were some areas of uncertainty that come to mind. Health guidance, right? We went from, in March, thinking this was a direct surface transmission issue, touching things, shaking hands, hugging people. Then we went to indirect surface, it's on a desk and someone was in that space and then you picked it up off of that, to droplets, right? Coughing, sneezing, large droplets. And now we're in the phase of aerosolized transmission, very minute particles that move about buildings. So that uncertainty changes how we respond and can be very costly with some of those measures. The other state COVID-19 response framework, certainly as we learn things, the state has appropriately adjusted the systems that we're using. But we went from the county data monitoring list to the blueprint for the safer economy and the colored tiers. And now we have the layer of the regional ICU metrics on top of that. Planning during that can be interesting because we've written plans to take cues from those various frameworks. So when the framework changes, we're pulling back up our plans and going through all of those items again to make sure that they're still in sync. So you see on the bottom slide, planning is an iterative process. Staff, parent, student sentiment. Many districts have done extensive surveys, and the sentiment can change quite a bit from, everybody wants their kids back in school, to the opposite, depending on what the local conditions are. So just a lot of uncertainty around these areas. Alan, do you care to add to anything to that?
No, I think we can move on and take time.
Sure. So this is just the table of contents of what's in the Fresno County Superintendent Schools Plan. We're not going to talk about each of those, but what I wanted to highlight is on the bottom right corner of the cover page, you see effective June 22. That's when we first published this, and our revised date of December 9th. And this is about our 10th version of this. So it is a little bit of Groundhog Day, that iterative process to make sure that this stays up to date. The challenge is keeping our staff informed and engaged and understanding the importance of all of this when it does change so rapidly. All right, next slide, please. And this is a graphical representation that was really a collaboration with the Fresno County Health Department, our health services department here in Fresno Unified, to help us deal with the, I saw my cousin's sister at a wedding and we sat next to each other for 5 minutes. Do I need to quarantine kind of questions? So we developed the person response, person A, B, C, and D, and E. And you can see this is the first place we refer people to, but it's technical and it's complicated to help go through this. And Alan, I know you have something similar in Long Beach that might look a little bit different. But when this changes, it can be a difficult communication to our staff.
Yeah, in Long Beach, we have essentially the same thing. It looks different, but we went through the same kind of process with our health partners. And this has been a great tool to help us to kind of understand what should be the proper reaction to the individual that has a concern about a contact.
All right, we're moving pretty fast. Now go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Sarah. So coordination, there's a lot of layers of coordination, one of which is with our public health officials, looking at current guidance that's coming out. And I will tell you, my cabinet here is tired of hearing me say good writing matters. Because we pore over every word in the guidance, every comma. If there's a misplaced modifier, we find it and we question it, because we're in education as opposed to the health business. And the guidance is what we'll be held accountable to. And so we want to make sure that we get that right. So first, we're studying it very closely. Then we're going back with our health officials and confirming the understanding that we have. Other interfaces with public health officials are with contact tracing, and that's a two-way street. If they're aware of a potential outbreak, they're letting us know so that schools can be prepared, and vice versa. When we have cases, we're letting them know as well, and that informs this toggling back and forth between in-person and distance learning. And being back in person, fortunately, we haven't had to shut schools, but we have had classrooms go on quarantine for 2-week periods. Several times a week, we're having this conversation. Alan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we're following very much along the same lines, trying to get out accurate, complete information with the most current guidance that we have, and we're keeping that in the individuals that need to know it as quickly as possible.
Next slide, please, Sarah. I think, Alan, this was you too. Some of the same lines of thinking.
Yeah, really quickly, just really acknowledging that we've had this constant communication with all of our different health allies, I'll call them, starting with monitoring what's happening with the recommendations are from the Center for Disease Control, our State Department of Public Health. We have continuous contact with both our LA County, and we're fortunate in Long Beach, we have our own health department. But this is an almost daily communication with them about what's happening and what the current guidelines are. We communicate things like contact tracing, positivity rates, all of those type of things with those different agencies to ensure that we have the most accurate, up-to-date current information.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. So communication with and coordination with other local agencies. So county offices, for the most part, I think have been facilitating up and down the state at least weekly calls with all the school districts and health departments in their area to gain some continuity. In Fresno Unified is not the only district in town. And so working together to stay in step so that the community understands the response and so that districts have an understanding of what the other districts are doing. Return to play, that could impact return to play if we can get back to the point where rates are low enough to have some athletics and arts performances. The last two bullets I want to hit on. As a county office, we run special ed classrooms all over the county on other district campuses. So they may or may not be back in class, but we're back in class. And so the coordination effort for that is interesting. When you only have a class for students with special needs on a campus, what's the expectation of service from the school district that's hosting that class. And same thing with extended learning program. All right, next slide, please, Sarah. And then, of course, within a school district itself, we've talked a lot about that already, the communication with creating that clarity of what the protocols are and expectations, meeting the legally mandated communication. You know, we have a new one coming into effect in January of different notifications that have to take place, the contact tracing that our health service folks are doing, and then turning that around to what Al and I are directly responsible for, and that's the terminal cleaning, right? You know, if we don't know there was an exposure in a classroom, how do we know to clean it? So just a lot of practical coordination that has to take place. Alan, do you want to add anything there?
No, I think I'll add that as it relates to this next slide, because I think all of this goes together about what we're trying. So if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we did fairly early on was we created a health and safety operations task force. You know, it's headed by our deputy superintendent, and it really tries to engage in all of these different subgroups, these sub-focus areas, in order to collaborate across the district. Being a large district with a lot of specialized departments, I will say if there has been somewhat of a small silver lining here, it has been the encouragement that we've seen with the collaboration across these different functional units. Never did I think that I was going to work as closely as I am with nursing services. Never did I think that I was going to work as closely as I did with various elements of these different teams to ensure that we are all providing the best services to students as we possibly can. And each one of these have committees that are associated that take deep dives in each one of these topics to ensure that we're properly addressing each one of those. So there's been a very collaborative process as we do that. And each of these communicate out reports to our school site to tell us what we should be doing and our guidance for each one of these topics. So we can jump to the next slide really quick. One of the other things that we did that came from that task force was the concept of establishing site-specific, what we call COVID captains. These are single points of contact at each school site, and it really is with the intent of establishing and applying consistent standards. There's a lot of fear and anxiety, and there's a lot of different interpretations of all of these things. And as we dug into what our district's responses are going to be, we want to make sure that we're getting that information directly out to school sites appropriately. It allows us to get the information out to the individual quickly so that we're not going through the layers of bureaucracy. We have an individual that's been empowered at school sites with the training to be able to respond to individual contacts. And it allows us to do that very effective and timely contact tracing. We're right there, we're at a school site, when someone comes up positive, we're able to jump into it very quickly and make determinations very effectively. So COVID Captain is a very big success for this program as well. So next slide.
I'm going to steal that from you, Alan.
Okay.
So this is just a graphical representation in Fresno County of what happens when you have a potential exposure, a symptomatic person or a positive case. That large gray box in the center triggers all of these other actions to happen. We've got public information officer, facilities, nursing services, human resources, county health department, all getting involved very quickly. Typically, this whole chart is executed in a day. Hopefully same day if we find out during a health screening in the morning. So just wanted to show, you know, there are a lot of areas of coordination here. Go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Sarah.
And the other thing that we've really not lost sight of is communicating to the public. Obviously, we're balancing HIPAA laws and what we can communicate versus the desire of the communities to understand what's happening internal to our district and their school site. So we've created our COVID dashboard. This is an area where you can go in as a parent or community member and look up what's happening across the district, or you can look up down to your individual specific school to determine the total number of cases, whether those cases are employees or whether those cases are students or visitors or others. But we have all of that information at a very high level out of respect of HIPAA laws, but at least gives the community a glimpse into where we're at and what's happening in our school sites directly.
All right, next slide, please, Sarah. So just as an ending thought here, the new normal. What of these items are going to stay with us for a long period of time, and what will return to the way that it was prior to the pandemic? My wife said to me, will we ever have a snow day again in California? Because we now have distance learning. These are questions that we'll be asking ourselves for quite a while in the future. And Alan, do you want to say that? I realize we're at 11, but there may be a few questions out there also.
Yeah, just as we move forward, how many of these are we going to be still battling with, even after there's an effective vaccine, and even after we try to move back? I think some of these topics that we've talked about here today are going to become part of our normal process, and so we just have to be prepared for how we address those. I think forever, our society, our world thinks very differently about things like disinfection, things like the N list, right? We all know this; it's part of our lexicon now, and it will stay well beyond. So I think at that point, I know we ran long, and I apologize, but we're good for questions.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so what I'll do is let people know that they could contact us through our email, and we're more than happy to share and connect them with you, Alan, with Sarah, with Jeff. Thank you so much for your presentation. I definitely have learned so much. We've been doing safely reopening websites on a weekly basis for our CASBO members, but I think, again, having this opportunity to really lay it out is critical as legislative staff have returned, and there's many proposals on how to safely reopen, and we hope that we can be seen as a resource. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll turn it over for Michelle to log us off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.